Hey there, I'm Quincy Davis. I'm in developer education at Netlify, and today joined by Regis from the New Dynamic. Thanks for joining us, Regis.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Really excited to chat all things Astro, and just see where we can take this conversation. But to get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do at the New Dynamic?
Yeah. So I'm the lead developer there. I mainly handle all the infrastructures and, decide on which projects we're going to use and which tool we're going to use, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was in charge last year of retooling our whole set of websites for Astro because we have many clients, content-based mainly, but and so what happens is we're using Git based. That's my core philosophy for the Jamstack. I just love it. Static site, static files in Markdown, static out. It's perfect. It's great. But as I said, our clients are heavily content oriented. They want to be able to edit and they need a CMS. And for years, we had a good CMS that did Git based called Forestry. And what it gave us was the ability to preview a Hugo site because Hugo is the static site generator we're using with Git based. I love it. Talked about it, wrote about it. That was my thing. I'm still loving it. And they give us the possibility to preview the content for editors, which is exactly what we need. That's the first thing that any editor would want to do is to see what it is before they hit the publish button. Forestry just ran a local Hugo server in the cloud, and it just made them do that, which is a thing Hugo cannot do. Server-side rendering with Hugo is not possible otherwise. And it was great, but they went out. They just decided to do something else. And then we had to find a new CMS for our Git-based site. And we looked and we tested many of them, and none of them gave us that preview solution that did zero work for us. Forestry, we had preview with zero work. We didn't have to retool a whole layouts for SSR rendering, et cetera, et cetera. It was perfect. None of the other CMS that we tried did that. So we had to move away from Git-based and ultimately from Hugo because Hugo is not yet ready to work with remote APIs. It's going to get there, but it's not there yet. And so we had to choose. We found the CMS. Sanity has always been a big favorite of ours. It's amazing. And we decided with Astro because we didn't have to start a whole new React journey that I personally was not tremendously interested in. I could just use whatever tool I wanted and jump on with that. So CMS previews led us to retool our whole websites last year. And so I got the amazing opportunity to build, I think we've been at 13 Astro websites over a year based on, so it's sort of migration per se.
So it's kind of an overnight change for you, essentially.
Yeah, it has been a very, great. I mean, that was fun because of the Astro. Astro gave us an amazing ease. And as I said, CMS preview is the thing we could easily get with Astro because of hybrid rendering. As I said, our clients are content-based. They just want to put their content out there. We've got publishers, book authors, international organizations like human rights, startups. They just need to push this data out there, and they don't really care for too many interactivities, dashboards, user interaction, etc. So for us, our websites are 99% static. But for that CMS preview, we need that SSR root, server-side rendering, so that the editors, when they're in Sanity, they can click on a button. It opens a URL on the production domain because we don't want to maintain another server as elsewhere for that. So it's the same production domain, and the URL will include an ID. We have the ID for this entry. We fetch the data for the draft, and we use the exact same layout that we use for the static entry because, we just have to pick the content type of the entry once we fetch it from the database, and we know which layout to use. That's the same layout for the static. So for us, there's no extra work, and we're able to present that CMS previews to the users. And
Are you having two different templates? Do you need a static template and the SSR template as well?
No, that's what's amazing about it. We have our pages files, or our root files, as I like to call them in Astro. Yep. One will do the static, just send all of the get static paths, and then one will just be an ID parameter for an SSR routing.
Gotcha.
Because we have a hybrid output in Hugo and in Astro, which means most of our routes are static, but then that one route is SSR, so it's just a parameter in Astro, pre-rendering is false, and then you just do your work, which is, as I said, get the ID, find the entry in the CMS, grab all of the data. It's the same layout, it's the same props, so we don't have to rework anything. And that's
really yeah. I was going to say that's really interesting, because I feel like you came at this and maybe the timing worked out really well, where you were able to come at this from having this toolkit with Astro at your disposal. Because I ran into a really similar problem a couple of years before that with the agency I was working for at the time took a similar approach, loved forestry, loved this Git-based CMS, loved the preview and all of that. But then we had some clients that were big enough or complex enough that it felt like we needed a sanity, we needed a contentful. And yet in all of those cases, we were doing a lot of education because we didn't really have that CMS preview like we did in the years when we were building our own our internal CMS on Rails, like everybody had back in the day. But what I've seen a lot of folks do, and actually what got me really interested in StackBit, which is where I worked before Netlify.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, it was that it was basically that we could bring visual editing to this Get Back CMS or other CMS solutions as well, and other benefits that we don't have to get into today, but that a lot of folks are saying, well, it seemed like we were kind of waiting on the content solution to provide that visual or the visual preview, and you're kind of looking at it from the other end of, well, I've got my framework, and my framework can provide the preview, so I'm going to lean on that instead.
Yeah. And then there's one tool. So with Astro, we have one tool for many of our interactions, and the fact that you can also create an API with it very easily, and a dynamic API with server-side API, a static API, whatever. So anytime you need an endpoint, and we had to do this gymnastics, which was easy with Netlify, to just create a serverless functions in Netlify because we needed some dynamic, integration into our website. And now it's just a route in Astro. And for us, it's a game changer. It's just, we don't have to maintain anything, even though it was super easy with Netlify. It's still, you have to maintain your serverless functions, and then you have to maintain your static core, and it was a different world. And now it's the exact same world. We use our components in those, endpoints. And yeah, that's great. Astro for me is really one tool for all. For now, I don't think I've got anything that I can't do with Astro right now, that I need an extra service. I mean, of course, yes, a few, but like that we used to need something else before. And that makes us completely what I like to call service agnostic, which means, don't take me wrong, I love Netlify. Most of our websites are there, and for me, this is the superior product. But sometimes our clients are in Cloudflare, and we just don't have to change anything. Everything is the same. We have the Netlify adapter for Astro, and we have the Cloudflare adapter for Astro. The code is exactly the same. We don't have to jump through any hoops to switch to one or the other, depending on the client's preferences. So that's, really great.
That's interesting. So your clients would have, it seems like they have more opinions about the infrastructure rather than the tooling per se.
Well, I say the clients, it's usually us, depending on the clients. As you say, we have some international organizations, human rights organizations, and we really think Cloudflare is great for that because of all of the security, et cetera, et cetera. And so we would suggest Cloudflare. And we know we can use it, and we can revert to Netlify if at some point we find that, it doesn't satisfy our needs, or vice versa. And we never tried Vercel, but I think we could do the same. They have the adapter for Astro, et cetera. So that's another perk.
So generally, the clients aren't coming to you with strong opinions necessarily on.
No, and actually, I don't think we would be a static Jamstack agency if we ever had to ask our clients what they think about the solution. When we started this company, Bud Parr, which I work with, which is a very big name in the Jamstack world, I started this many years ago, and he always just give it to them without them knowing that it was Jamstack. There's, and that's how we made so much progress into using new technologies. If we had to wait for clients, we would be using WordPress still. So
Yep. Exactly. So, okay, a couple minutes ago, you mentioned that you don't feel like you really need to bring in any other residual tooling because you have Astro. It seems to solve a lot of these challenges today. What is something what's a tool that you would have, or a service that you would have had to bring into Hugo that you've been able to leave behind?
well, I used to say serverless functions. Usually serverless function, you're going to be relying either on your host like Netlify, which does that, Cloudflare does that as well, or you're going to use your own serverless, cloud somewhere and use that. With Astro, we just create an endpoints in our root files. SSR are static, and here we are. I mean, no, it's not going to be static. It's going to be SSR if it's a serverless function. But like if we need to record something, and AstroDB is a great example. I've read a lot about AstroDB. I'm very excited about it, even though I didn't create anything with it. But I'm thinking about creating a simple root in Astro that could register or record something using AstroDB that we'll be using afterward, like the popularity of a page, or even a newsletter sign up that we could, handle later on when we have a bunch of those stored in AstroDB rather than using MailChimp right out of the box because we never know what we might be using in the end. There's a lot of use cases. So mainly I would say serverless functions and then server-side rendering for previews. We used to rely on the CMS to give us that. Other CMS, Git-based CMS will give you that functionality, like, and I don't know how you call it, like an instant page builders, where you get to view exactly what you change in the page. I'm not a huge fan of these UX. I'd rather you click, once you're done, you just click on a button and you see exactly what this is. But they give you that, but it's a lot of extra work because you have to recreate those templates, or you have to make a solution in the logic, declare a lot of parameters and settings, et cetera, et cetera. So again, the CMS previews is a great advantage. And
Yes.
You caught me off guard, but I'm sure there's many more.
No, it's a good point. I've found that to be a trade-off, because that was generally what StackBit was bringing to the table was, hey, a lot of these content editors really like the WYSIWYG type of real-time experience. I mean, they're both real-time, but the trade-off is, okay, the developers have to do a little bit more work. You make the content editors a little bit happier. I personally have found that it depends a lot to me on, I've always said, you need to understand the client before you can design the proper solution for them. And I've had clients that can really get around much more technically in or really, really easily in a more like form-based solution, and then some that get tripped up and say, okay, I'll do the work to make sure that you get this nice experience there. And the other thing I was gonna mention was, it was really interesting that you went right to serverless functions and the difference between what it feels like developing with Hugo and Astro. And what's really interesting to me is that what the Netlify adapter does is it takes those endpoints and it turns them into serverless functions. It's just that you don't necessarily need to know that.
And I don't want to know.
Yes, maybe it comes back to developer experience. It feels like you're working within the framework, and then you can bring in a tooling. Yeah.
And everything together. So we have a bunch of helper functions that we use for the templates or that we use for the logic in Astro. And if I was working in the Netlify in an SSR environment like Netlify, where you have to create your function independently, well, then I wouldn't be able to reuse those helpers. I mean, that would be more complicated. I would have to import them in the serverless package, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So that's one. There's many examples. That's one of them. Like everything that we've built for the website, we can reuse in the endpoints in the SSR serverless function built within the Astro pages folder. So that's a perk.
Okay. And and so you had mentioned AstroDB, and I've been tinkering around with this a lot, because another scenario I run into pretty regularly is, okay, so we talked about your previous content source choice was Git-based CMS, local files, uh, and now it's Sanity. And I think in both cases, they're content management solutions, but it feels weird to to store things like, I don't know, comments on a blog or
Exactly.
thumbs up, thumbs down votes or that sort of thing. So yeah, do you not have you had to build any of those features since you've worked with Astro?
I don't, but I wish. Like, there's a something that I've worked on and I really want to be using in production is what I like to call like hybrid routing, because Astro gives you that opportunity to create a static route and a server-side rendered route. And I would love to use it for the same permalink. I'm not sure if I'm clear, but like, let's say you have 10,000 of events. Our companies that we work with, some are very old. They have a legacy on the web, and they've been using many different frameworks throughout, but always migrating their content. And they hold events, and so they could have like 5,000 events over the past 10 years. And they want this out there. You know, nobody's going to really care, but they want this out there. It's part of their legacy. It's important for them. So now we have to build those 5,000 pages that nobody cares for. I mean, that very few people cares for, even though they matter. And what I would love to be able to do, and I know I can actually, is build thousands of those static and the rest server-side rendered. So that for the very seldomly distributed pages, we can do SSR, but for the upcoming events, so the events from the last year, we can have them static. And that's something that I would do. And so it's not a feature in Astro, but you can do it because static routes will always win over SSR routes. So if my SSR routes is perfectly able to give me any events, even the one I publish statically, if there's a static event that exists, it'll always win. So I'm fine with this. But AstroDB could help us improve that logic, because for now it's easy. We say upcoming events is static, past events are SSR. But if you're talking about products or pages, it's going to really matter. The algorithm is going to be weird. At some point, you're going to need the editor to input and say that page is super popular on the site. It needs to be static, even though you don't know about it. And there's also the fact that sometimes your page is going to be popular and you don't know why. There's going to be a morning show talking about a topic and you're going to end up as first result in Google search for that topic for some reason. You have no idea. And then if it's only SSR, it's going to crash the server. So AstroDB we could use it to store those little information, like, for example, the popularity of a page, because every time we have a page view, if it's not that expensive to use, and I don't think it is, you just add a little stats, and then when we reach 1,000, we figure, that page needs to be static. We're going to push something to Sanity that say, hey, that page is static. And then when the algorithm, we're going to take that into account. This is one of the use cases that I've thought of about AstroDB. And the other one, as I said, is that when people want to register for a newsletter, because you're developing a product, we're using a lot of startups and they're launching something new. They don't really know if it's going to be MailChimp. They don't know. They just want people to be signing up. And before that, you had to develop your own solution to kind of store them somewhere. Or Insanity, as you say, which for me is really, for CMS. Like, I don't want to be storing this little info over there. It's not just the DB. So AstroDB would come in handy. Like, that would be my first choice. I just have to use this framework that I love and that I really know, and I can just push to AstroDB that one information whenever somebody sign up an email. That'd be great. And maybe forms. As forms, we rely on Netlify forms a lot, and we love it. Super easy to build. We have created many reusable packages so that it's super easy for us to create forms on Netlify. But if for some reason Netlify forms go away, or if you have to use Cloudflare, which doesn't have a form solutions, AstroDB could be a solution. That doesn't solve the send the email part, but it solves the storing the information and then do whatever you want with it afterwards. So that's something we've been looking always, because we always want to be kind of service agnostic, even though AstroDB is a service and we might end up paying for it. But, it's attached to our framework, not necessarily to other services. So that's also another use case I'd love to explore about it.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's just a great solution for it. It's one of these things that feels like I've felt this a lot over the years with Jamstack. It's like I have the 95% of the solution with the tooling that I have here, and now I've got to do this little thing And now I'm making architectural decisions to be able to accommodate this other 5%. And so something like Astro,
And it's a pain.
It is because it makes everything harder.
Yeah, it makes, yeah. Because that thing, those 5%, they're taking up maybe, half of your time, and you have to learn about this new service, this new tool. It takes time as well, maintain it, etc. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've been tinkering with it a bit and definitely like it so far. And around the same time, we launched Netlify blobs, and blobs are really interesting because they can serve the same sort of purpose, where you can store strings, so you can have a key value pair. I mean, it's more like, it's not necessarily one-to-one. It would be more like, a KV store and less like a structured database. But then I think that's interesting because there are scenarios where, hey, I might just need this to store this dynamic setting. I don't want to manage a database schema or something like that you could spin up. And then what I played with this week was thinking a lot about a solution that would have been really great in these earlier Jamstack years, and that is that blobs can also store files. I believe it's up to 5 gigs today. And so what I was playing with the other day was, I was like, okay, and authentication is a whole other bucket. And I was like, I've been frustrated with a lot of the auth solutions that are out there. And today there's no go-to auth solution for Astro. So it's like, okay, I'm going to spin up my own custom passwordless auth solution. You put your email in if you're a user, sends you a magic link, and then you click on the link and you get authenticated. I'm going to store all that user information in a database. AstroDB is a great fit for this. But then what if I want something like, I want the user to be able to upload an avatar, but the rest of my site is using, say, markdown files for content. Now to be able to, it's either like, I got to go get another image service, or I need to come up with a way or work with the GitHub API to upload files, or something that's going to be a huge pain. And so I tinkered with the Netlify blobs, and I was actually able to say, with Astro, without any client-side JavaScript or anything, you can just post the uploaded file to an Astro endpoint, and then within the endpoint, save it to the blob, and then what I did was I had another endpoint that would then retrieve the blob and return the image itself. So it was really, I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm going to try it, but it was kind of amazing. I'm like, is that something that would come up in your projects, or could you think of other use cases that would be kind of interesting as like one-off?
Well, I'm not sure if we. Also, image has been a problem. Image transformation. There's a lot of services out there that does it great. ImageX, Content, Cloudinary, sorry. But they come up with a price, and our clients are never always that big that they can afford that amount of money just to transform images. Astro has its own solution to transform images, and it's great, but it takes time to build. Like and even Hugo, which is really great at building sites, when it comes to transforming images, it's the same time for everybody. It's a process, it's a work. So when you tell me that I can store files, which I never thought about, and even though I'm sure everybody did, but I didn't, on KV, I'm thinking, could we store images over there and then perform the transformation ourselves? That seems like a very big deal. But right now we're relying on Sanity to transform the images, and it does it very well. But then again, it comes at a cost, and if your website is super popular, then the CDN cost is going to increase, etc. And we've been always trying to find that agnostic solution that doesn't tie us to either ImageX or Cloudinary or anyone. So that might be now that you're talking about files in KV, it makes me think about that. Like, how could we store not too big images, or PDF files as well? That's the other thing. Our clients have tons and tons of PDF files. And if you are using Git-based, which I love, then you're going to have a huge repo, and it's always a problem to maintain, gigas and gigabytes of files in a repo. If you're using another service, then it's bandwidth, because those PDFs can grow fast. So I don't know. Yeah, that's what it makes me think about, the files.
Interesting. Because I was going to say, we also recently we recently released our own image CDN, which just works natively with Astro. So if the files live in
Oh,
your
that's the solution. Oh, in
yes,
your repo. Okay.
you just
It
change the
has to live
structure
in the repo.
URL and it'll provide those transformations on the fly. But now you have me thinking, I wonder if can we combine those two? Can we have an image stored in a blob and
That'd be
then
great.
form it? That would be really interesting. Now I know what
Yeah.
I'm thinking. What's next?
That'd be great. Can't wait
Yeah.
to hear it.
Well, Regis, this has been wonderful. I know we were talking beforehand, and I said I know once we get into this, I'm going to say I feel like I could talk about this forever, and
Yep.
now I feel like that. But I'll cut us off there. But yeah, really appreciate the time and the chat, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
I would love to. Thank you.
All right, thanks.